or could be individual. Depends on what level of involvement they have. It could be individual, it could be a company. Most of the time, customer also. But they are stakeholders also. Including a project team, some contractors team, subcontractors team, everybody is stakeholders. All your finance team also involved. It is part of your organizational team involved in this project. Right? But I cannot say at this stage you can able to identify 100% of the stakeholders by name or by organization or by position. But you can identify in such a way that we need interior design consultants. We need fire safety consultants. Yeah. That kind of identification can be done at this stage. Then when we move through the planning work, we get more details. When we appoint them, then we will have a specific name and the organization name will be there. So it gets updated throughout the project life cycle, in fact, the stakeholder register. But here we are trying to put the effort to identify all the stakeholders, and we need to collect all the relevant information about these stakeholders. What information you need? Who is the stakeholder? Which organization he may come from? What kind of role he may play in the project? What kind of influence he may have on the project? Whether the stakeholder is a supporter to the project, neutral to the project, or resistor to the project. What kind of knowledge, skills, expertise, and experience they have. All these can be identified and documented. So that we will have a fair idea of who are the stakeholders, what is their relevant information about the stakeholders. Some stakeholders, as I say, some stakeholders may contribute investment amount, financial resources. Some are contributing resources. Some are contributing expertise services, right? But all are need to be considered and are to be managing, right? Even when we go to the next step in the planning stage, we are going to collect the detailed requirements from the stakeholders. From whom we are going to collect? You are going to collect from the stakeholders of the project. So you must have a good idea of who are the stakeholders, what kind of knowledge, experience, expertise they have, right? That's why we are putting the effort at this stage to identify all the stakeholders. So in the stakeholder register, you can clearly see who is the stakeholder. Project manager team, project manager. That is their role. But every organization, they may do their own analysis. They use the same process. They do their own analysis. Everybody definitely involved in stakeholder. So that's why I told you before. During the initiation, you may not have a chance of involved yourself in the initiation. Most of you joining in the project during the execution stage, or some are joining in the planning stage. But if you are working in a project management consultancy or design consultancy or with the client organization, you may have a chance of involving yourself in the initiation of the project. Or PMO organizations, you have that chance. Otherwise, most of the time you are all entering into the project only at the start of the execution stage. That's why I'm explaining you how it is happening. Okay. Clear? Apart from this, there are two other actions we need to do. Our company has done a lot of projects in the past, say 10 years. We have done different nature of projects. During this management of these projects or execution of these projects, we developed a lot of templates. We developed a lot of processes. We developed a lot of sequences in terms of different nature of work which we need to execute to achieve the effective results. We have done, right? So are you going to do all the processes, procedure, templates again from the scratch? No. So what we need to do, we need to go into our company database. We need to pick up all the templates, processes, procedures our company has utilized in the past. But do you need to remember one thing? All these templates available within your organization may not be directly suitable for the nature and size and complexity of the project you are going to work on. It has to be refined to make it suitable for our current project. But that is easier compared to developing from the scratch. It may take time, right? That's why we need to collect all our organizational, which is part of the organizational process asset, our policies, procedures, methodology, technology we normally use. All this information need to be collected and kept it for our ready reference. And also we have done different nature of projects. So we may look at the similar nature of project which we are going to handle now. So you go and look at it. There are 3-4 projects, similar nature of projects our company has done in the past. So we go and collect all the previous project records of these projects and keep it ready for your reference. Okay, many things we can take in from there. Methodology, technology, selections, lessons learned, documentations there. Especially if you have done lessons learned documentation in the past project very well, which will be very useful information. Why? When you go through the lessons learned documentation, you will be able to realize what kind of problem we have faced, why we face such a problems, what kind of action we have taken, why we have taken such action. We have situations, right? Based on the situation, you have came up with certain actions for dealing with the project situation, right? Why you have taken such action? What is the result of implementation of such action? Whether it helped us in improving the performance or we have taken additional action to achieve the improvement in the performance. All this can be seen through the lessons learned documentation. So if you know what are all the potential problems we could face in doing such a nature of project, while you are doing this project, you can think of how can we prevent such a nature of problems in this project. That's where it helps us. If you know what are the problem you could face in this nature of project, you can think of what's the best methodology, technology, combination, process interactions can be designed in preventing such a problems. Then you will be in a better position in achieving the objectives of the project. So all these are being done through the initiation stage. We collect all our project records, lessons and documentation and keep it for our ready reference, which is not done as part of the process, but is all naturally done in the initiation stage, so that you are ready for moving to the planning work. Okay, that's what we are doing in the initiation of the project. Now let's go to the planning. The first process in the planning is develop project management plan. Develop project management plan. Right. What is project management plan? The result of this process is project management plan. Project management plan is nothing but it is a comprehensive action for executing this project. We are executing, monitoring, controlling until closure of the project, which is nothing but compilation of all the plans created through the planning process group, like scope management plan, schedule management plan, cost management plan, quality management plan, resource management plan, communications management plan, risk management plan, procurement management plan, stakeholder engagement plan, process improvement plan, requirement management plan, change management plan, defining the life cycle strategy, life cycle approach, whether you want to use predictive life cycle approach, or you want to use agile approach, or you want to use hybrid approach, all is being decided and documented under the project management plan. So you will get project management plan only upon completion of the plan, all the planning processes. So you will not get the project management plan straight away when you enter into the process, because it is a compilation of all our plans created through the planning processes. So whenever you are entering into this process as a first time, as part of the planning work, what will you do there? You say you have work to do. What is the level of information available with you when you are starting this planning, this process? What is the information available with you about the project? Yeah, what is that? Where is that information available? Huh?
In the project charter.
Project charter. That is the only information available with us. Now what we have understanding is what is the high level information about the project, right? That's all we have now. With this information, are you able to develop the detailed plans? No. Of course, we need detailed requirements in order to create the plans, which we will do as part of the planning book. So, by understanding, by going through the information contained in the project charter, what you can understand? Nature of the project, size of the project, and complexity of the project. And the stakeholders' expectations can be understood. With this information available within the project charter, what we need to do? We need to think how we are going to achieve the objectives of the project. What is our strategy and approach in managing this project? So basically, we need to develop a high-level strategy in managing this particular project. It's not you are thinking general. Based on the information contained in the project charter, you're thinking about what is our strategy for managing this project. Basically, you are thinking, in order to achieve the objectives contained in the project charter, what all the processes we are going to utilize? So we need to think. We have to do a mind mapping. What we have said 24 processes in the planning. What are the processes from the planning process group you are going to utilize? What are the processes from executing process group you need to utilize? What are the processes from monitoring control process group you need to utilize? What is the process from closing process group you need to utilize? What are the tools and techniques and methods you may apply? What is the interaction required between the various processes to achieve the objectives of the project? That kind of mind mapping has to be created and need to be documented. So you have 49 processes. Do you think we are going to use all the 49 processes across all type of project, all size of project, all level of complexity? Is it logical? So you as a project manager, you and your team has to determine what are the processes from planning, execution, monitoring, control, and closing processes need to be utilized, what tools and techniques, what level of interaction required between the processes in order to achieve the objectives of the project. Has to be determined. That is the concept called tailoring. That's a tailoring concept. You are tailoring the project management processes, tools and techniques, and the interactions required between the processes in order to meet the specific project objectives. The concept is tailoring concept. That's the first step we need to do in this. Also, we need to think about, by understanding nature of the project, whether we need to use predictive life cycle approach, or we need to use agile approach, or we need to use both hybrid approach. We need to think and document. It's all part of our this work as a first step. That's all we can do now. Okay, do it, document it, move on. Then when you complete all these planning processes, we come back to this process again. We pull all the plans, all the pilot plans. Because when you are creating the plans, the plan is not going to be get finalized in a single revision. You may need to go for multi-revisions. Then when you reach to the final revision, yes, this plan is workable, you establish, then you come back to this point again. Then you pull all the plans and call it as project management. So it is a two-stage work. Clear? Okay, we will talk about it more when we complete all other processes. The next is online participants, send it out. Plan scope management. Plan scope management. The result of this process is scope management plan. The result of this process is scope management plan. What is scope management plan? This is one of the good concept in project management. In every knowledge area, the first process is for developing the management plans. Say plan scope management plan. Plan schedule management plan. Plan cost management plan. Plan quality management plan. Plan resource management plan. Plan communications management plan. Plan risk management plan. Plan procurement management plan. Plan stakeholder engagement plan. So each knowledge area, we creating a strategy for managing each knowledge area. Remember always, we have a tendency. Whenever there is something, okay, we start our jump into action. We don't think. Then we go and stuck somewhere. Project managers always must have this attitude or the characteristics. You must always think in advance. How are you going to plan? How are you going to execute? How are you going to monitor the performance? Or how are you going to measure the performance? When there are variances, depending on the magnitude of variance, if the variance is minor in nature, how will you handle it? When the variance is major in nature, how will you handle it? How will you close the project? We need to think every aspect. So basically, through the scope management plan, you are thinking about what is your strategy and approach in managing the scope of the project. That's all. So it is a advanced thinking. So basically what you are thinking about how are you going to perform the processes available in planning, execution, control until the closing. That's all you are thinking. Say for example, I am thinking here how I am going to collect the requirements from the stakeholders. What are the tools and techniques I may utilize? How I am going to come up with a project scope of work? Create scope. What are the tools and techniques I may utilize? How I am going to create the WBS? What are the tools and techniques I may apply? Then I will think further stage, how I am going to control the scope of the project. What do you mean by control the scope? While you are executing the work, control scope is happening. Meaning you need to measure your scope performance periodically. When you are executing the work, you need to measure your scope performance. We need to determine the appropriate frequency of measurement, whether it is weekly measurement or bi-weekly measurement or monthly measurement, we need to determine. So when you are measuring your actual performance, you are going to compare with your plan to see whether you are aligned with the plan. Suppose you are facing variances, according to the magnitude of variances, you need to come up with a necessary corrective action to improve the performance so that you will be able to achieve the project work aligned with your baselines or plans. Right? How are you going to do that? We need to think. So, but the development of management plan happening in 2 stages. Now we do not have much understanding about the project. We only have the high level information about the project in our hand, right? So are we able to think with this information? Are we able to think about execution and control and closure now? So you can only think as a first step in management plan development. How are you going to plan? Think, document, move through the processes, complete the planning work. When you get the better understanding of the project work, you think about how are you going to execute, what are the tools and techniques we may use, what methodology, technology we may use, how are you going to measure the performance of scope, time, cost, quality, and so on. You can think. So it is a 2-stage thinking. So the management plan development is happening in 2 stages. One is how are you going to plan first, and then we will think about how are you going to execute, control, and close. So first step, we think about planning only. So how are you going to plan, right? So which requires, we need to collect the detailed requirement from the stakeholders. How are you going to collect it? Why I need to think? Do you think the collection of requirements is easy? You need to collect the detailed requirement from the stakeholders. They need to define the requirement in a well quantified manner. Then only we can able to create a plan for achieving these requirements. If you are saying blah, 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 you will not get anything. It should be well defined and quantified. Say, for example, you need to collect the requirements for a particular deliverable. There are 5 stakeholders involved in this deliverable. You are our 5 team members involved yourself. So you can easily conduct meeting in a small project office, and we can able to understand the detailed requirements from them. We document it, review with them, and we can finalize the requirements easily. So we can use meeting as a technique, right? Some of the deliverable, for example, there are stakeholders from the client side. There are expert stakeholders like subject matter experts, like consultants involved. And there are people, those who are going to be maintaining the project upon handing over, like facility management people. So multidisciplinary stakeholders involved. In this case, your meeting will not work. It has a different technique. It's called facilitated workshop. Say, for example, some of the deliverables, you have 50 over stakeholders need to be called for to get the requirements related to this deliverable. Do you have the facility for 50 over stakeholders to call for a meeting? Even you call for a meeting with the 50 stakeholders, are we able to achieve the work? So it has a different technique. So depending on the nature of the stakeholders, number of stakeholders, and the nature of the deliverable, we may need to use different techniques in terms of collecting the requirement. That's why we want you to think and document. How are you going to collect the requirements? What are the tools and techniques you may use? Document it. How are you going to create the scope of work? What are the tools and techniques you may use? How are you going to create the WBS? What are the tools and techniques you may use? Document it. So you can use that strategy in performing these processes so that you will be able to move through these processes smoothly without any troubles. Otherwise, you don't think you straight away jump into collect requirements. You did 2 deliverable, collect a requirement nicely, 3rd deliverable, I don't know what to do. Then you will stuck. That's why we do not want this to happen. We want you to think, strategize, and move on. This is the characteristic we need to develop as a project managers. Very good. The next is collect requirements. Collect requirements. What do you mean by collect requirements? It gives me an impression that I don't know, I don't have any requirements so far. You know, consolidated requirements. Okay. That's the one you have already in the project charter, which is consolidated, high level. But we have the requirements. We have only high level requirements. We have only high level requirements. We have collected from the key stakeholders and documented in the project charter. That is not enough for us to develop the detailed plans. What we need? We need detailed requirements from the stakeholders. So in this process, we are collecting the detailed requirements from the stakeholders in a well quantified manner, well defined and quantified manner, so that we will be able to understand the requirement very well. All the processes here, the planning processes, you are performing to achieve these requirements. Basically, why are you creating all these plans? To show them we know how to create the plans? No. All the plans are created for demonstrating how are we going to achieve their requirements defined in the requirement documentation here. That's all. So here we are collecting the detailed requirements from the stakeholders. What is the result of this process? Requirements documentation. Requirements documentation. What are the requirements we need to collect? Firstly, we need to understand what is the product details. What is the product they want? They need to define the product details, right? Size, shape, functionality, performance, aspects of the product has to be defined. If you don't understand the product details, how are you going to select the methodology, technology, standard, processes, procedures, right? Firstly, we need to collect product requirements, which defines the functions and features of the product. Then we need to collect what all the methodology, technology, standards, processes, procedures we are going to utilize in achieving the product requirements, which is called project requirements. Then we need to think about quality requirements, test requirements, verification requirements, acceptance requirements. Acceptance criteria has to be defined, right? Acceptance requirements, functional requirements, business requirements, maintenance requirements, all can be detailed. So we are talking about product requirement, project requirement, quality requirement, test requirements, verification requirements, acceptance requirements, maintenance requirements, and so on. We can keep expanding this list. So we are collecting all the requirements in detail and documenting under requirement documentation. How it should be? It should be well defined and a quantified manner. Then only we can able to create the plans for achieving these requirements in the further processes. This is one. Second result from this process is called requirements traceability matrix. Requirements traceability matrix. Requirements traceability matrix. What is that? When we are collecting the requirements, we are talking about product requirement, project requirement, technical requirements, quality requirement, test requirements, verification requirements, acceptance requirement, maintenance requirements, and so on. All these going to be provided by a single stakeholder. There are multi-stakeholders involved in providing the requirement related to the each deliverable, right? Some are responsible for defining the product requirements. Some are responsible for defining the project requirements. Some are responsible for defining the technical requirements. Some are responsible for defining the quality requirements. There are multi-stakeholders involved in defining the various requirements required for the product. How we are going to keep track of all these stakeholders and their requirements? What do you mean by keep track of? We have a responsibility. What is our responsibility? During the planning, we are creating the plan for achieving the requirements of the stakeholders. So we need to take into consideration all the requirements defined in the requirement documentation while you are creating the plans to ensure that the requirements will be achieved while you are creating the product in the execution stage, right? That's what the plan is. Then during execution, we need to ensure the requirements are being achieved and the products are being created according to the stakeholders' requirement. We have a responsibility. During monitoring control, we need to see whether we are achieving the plans in order to meet the requirements of the stakeholders. Then we find out if there are any variances, we are taking action to make sure that we will be able to achieve the requirements of the stakeholders and complete the work according to the plan. Until the closure. Because in the closure, we need to demonstrate to the stakeholders, we have achieved the product according to your requirements. So we have a responsibility to manage these requirements throughout the project life cycle. So how we are going to achieve that? There are two things we can do to achieve that. One is we can create a requirement management plan which defines our strategy for managing the requirements of the stakeholders, which is being created as part of this process itself, project scope management plan itself. Second is requirement traceability matrix. In order to understand the requirement traceability matrix, I give you an example. Assuming while you are doing this process, collect requirements, you collecting the detailed requirements by involving the different stakeholders. But you have not created the requirement traceability matrix. You created all the plans, you finalize the plan, you move to the execution, you are executing the work, you are producing the deliverables. When you are producing a particular deliverable, you are facing a problem on a particular deliverable. What is the problem? You are not able to meet certain requirements due to your methodology problem or technology problem you are experiencing in the project. How will you resolve it? You are facing a problem in a particular deliverable. You are not able to meet certain requirements of the stakeholders given to you or collected from the stakeholders. How will you resolve this problem? Definitely, you will have a meeting with the team. Definitely, first step, you will have a meeting with the team to understand why we are facing this problem, what kind of problem, how it affects that, what is the solution available with us to solve this problem in order to achieve the requirements of the stakeholders, right? Definitely, you will discuss. But you will not be able to come to conclusion until you involve the stakeholders who have provided the requirements related to this deliverable. How will you know who are the stakeholders involved with this deliverable? Do you know them? Where you identified? Identify stakeholder. Here only you know the stakeholder name, which organization coming from, what kind of role they may play in the project that comes. You are not created. That's what I mean. So what do you need to do now? We need to go back to the planning work. We need to dig out all the planning meetings, collect requirements workshops we have conducted. We pick up those meetings and try to understand who are the stakeholders involved, who are the stakeholders, what they provided, and so on. And then we identify the stakeholders. And then we call them to come into the meeting. We discuss. We may come up with a solution to solve the problem. By the time what will happen? The problem already bigger. Is it effective way of management? No. That's why when you are collecting the requirement itself, you are creating a matrix indicating, okay, what are the requirements, which is at a high level product, project, and what are the specific, who are the stakeholders involved, who provided this, where are they located, every information already documented there. So whenever you are facing any problem in achieving the requirements during execution, go to the requirement traceability matrix, get the stakeholders involved with you, and they will be able to help you in resolving it because they know their product very well. More than you, they know their product. They know they have done this kind of product before. They know what kind of problem we could face. What is the best methodology, technology we can use in achieving this, they know. So we have to utilize them efficiently, even during the planning, during execution, during monitoring control, in order to get their positive contribution for the project development. That is part of our stakeholder engagement activity. Okay. So you see how it helps you. So you will be able to effectively manage the requirements throughout the project life cycle. That's why we are creating here. Second result is requirements traceability matrix. Even during the execution stage, the stakeholders may propose certain changes to the requirements. They may sometimes they remove certain requirements, they add certain requirements. All this can be updated into the stakeholder register. So we can able to see whether requirement still active or inactive. If it is active, what is the status? Whether any changes happen to this requirement? Not? Okay. If there is changes, yes, there is a changes proposed or modified. It has been revised into the revision plan 3 and it is being implemented. We can see the status of achieving all these requirements can be easily tracked throughout the project life cycle. So we'll be in a better position in managing the requirements efficiently throughout the project life cycle until we hand over the deliverable to the stakeholders. That's the way it helps us. Clear? Okay. Next is defined scope. Defined scope. What do you mean defined scope? We have collected the detailed requirements. Then we need to develop the scope of work. What is scope of work? You all definitely involved in some way in managing the scope of work in your projects on a daily basis. You are seeing through the scope of work documents. Can you recall from your mind? Tell me, what is the structure of the scope of work? What are the key elements defined within the scope of work? Can you tell me? From your experience, yeah. Design, okay. This execution part, it shows, okay. Methodology, testing. Well. So basically, it starts with the executive summary of the scope of work, and then they talk about the product, and then they talk about methodology, technology, standards, processes, procedures to be utilized, and then they talk about the quality, right? And then they talk about the various tests to be performed and the frequency to be performed, and then they talk about acceptance criteria in what are various acceptance criteria for each area of the product, and then they talk about maintenance aspects. Then finally, you can see one aspect, project exclusions. These are the items included in this, and these are the items not included. There are many things available in the market. Are you going to do everything for every project? So you need to define what is included in this project and what is not included in this project. Such a level of clear definement must be available in the scope of work. That's what we are doing here. We are basically integrating the collector requirements into scope of work to clearly define what is included, what is not included. That's it. So what is the result of this process? Project scope statement. What's the result? Project scope statement. That's the project management terminology, but you're calling a scope of work generally. Right? The project management terminology is project scope statement. So when you go through the scope of work, it comes up with the executive summary, then they define the product, they define the methodology, technology standards, and then quality, and then they talk about test and the frequencies, and then they talk about acceptance criteria, and then they talk about maintenance, then project exclusions. These are the, including the key deliverables. But there is one important point we must remember in this process. Whenever I finalize the project scope statement in this process, it may go multiple revisions with the stakeholders. Finally, we agree, yes, this is what we want. And then the stakeholders are signing off. Then that becomes the final revision of the scope of work. So whenever I use the terminology project scope statement, which gives me two important messages. Number one, it indicates to you that we have the final scope of work in our hand. We have the final scope of work signed up by the stakeholders in our hand. That is the first message. What is the second message? That means we are ready to start the planning work. We are ready to start the planning work. So our real planning work only starts upon completion of the defined scope process. Assuming you are now finalized the scope of work, you create a certain division of scope of work, you move to the planning work. Definitely you can create the plans, but no plans can be finalized. Why? because the scope itself is not final. Then how can we finalize all the plans? You may create the plans. So you're wasting your time and efforts. That's why our focus in project management is in the defined scope process, we are finalizing the scope of work and getting the stakeholder sign up. Yes, this is what we want. Of course, this is a big effort. We are doing multiple exercises in order to achieve this. But generally, it is happening during the planning stage. You may not have involved. You are getting the scope of work as part of the tender document itself. That term already finalized by us. So you are getting that scope of work as part of the tender documents. Then your tender is awarded, you are using the scope of work to do the detailed planning and executing them. Right? That's the way it happens. The next is create WBS. Let's create WBS. What is WBS? Okay, work breakdown. What is work breakdown structure? Tell me your understanding.
We are doing each activity.
You are doing each activity.
I mean writing each activity.
So
and
you will
write
write down
them
each
where-
activity from the scope of work. That's what I do. From the scope of work, you write down each activity. No. I give a small example to understand the WBS and the importance of it. Upon completion of the create scope, right? Define scope. You finalizing the scope of work. At this stage, basically your project manager table is full. What is there? You have a detailed collected requirements, multiple volume, architecture, structure, mechanical, electrical, and so on. You may have that, right? And then you have the detailed scope of work for all the disciplines. So you are basically, your table is full. So what is your next duty? Use each of the volume to sleep in the lunch. Every day one volume. So we get the plan in our mind, right? No. We have to create a plan for achieving this scope of work agreed with the stakeholders, right? That's what our next duty. So how are you going to create the plan? So you take each volume, read through each page, highlight, and then come up with a plan. When you will finish. So when you look at this volume of documents in front of you, what you will feel? Oh my God, how I'm going to finish this project? That's what you will feel naturally, right? So why we need to keep this volume of documents in detail and try to come up with a plan? Why not we break down this scope of work into the deliverables we are going to create from this scope of work? Say, for example, let's take a building project scope of work. You can break down the scope of work into substructure, superstructure, architectural work, mechanical work, electrical work, infrastructure work. So we know what are going to create. And the substructure, we have to create basement 1, basement 2, basement 3. Still bigger, I must create structure, architecture, mechanical, electrical breakdown. So I can see what all the deliverables I can produce or I have to produce from this scope of work. That's what I'm doing. So basically, I'm breaking down the scope of work into deliverable-oriented components from bigger size deliverable all the way down to achieving smallest size deliverable. When the deliverables are smaller in size, easy for you to plan, execute, control, and deliver to the stakeholders. So basically, you are making your life easier. So when you are going through the breakdown of deliverables from bigger size deliverable, normally you break down into phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 deliverable. And then you talk about sub-project 1, sub-project 2, and so on. Major deliverables first. And then you break down further. And then you break down further. And then you break down further until you get the deliverable smaller in size. Until you get the deliverable smaller in size. The lowest level in the WBS is called work package. Work package. Whenever we say work package, which means it's the smallest size deliverable. So basically, we are making our life easier in planning and managing the project. When you go through the WBS structure, you can understand what are the deliverables we are going to produce from this scope of work. Once you understand the deliverable which we need to produce, then your efforts become easier. If you show to the team, sir, these are the deliverables we are going to produce. No problem, sir. We have produced such a number of deliverables in the past. Their understanding of the project become better. Even their understanding will be better than reading through the whole entire document of scope of work. Because they want to know what are the deliverables in this project. So they can see the deliverables from higher order to the smallest deliverable. So when you look at the WBS, you can able to visualize the entire project. Once you visualize the entire project, everything becomes easier. If you do not understand the project, then everything becomes difficult. Right? Well, not necessarily you think, if you don't understand the project, everything is difficult. This project is difficult. But if you understand the project well, everything becomes easier. So you can able to visualize the entire project by breaking the scope into deliverables. Once you visualize, your planning, execution, monitoring efforts all become easier. Right? That's what we are trying to say. Basically, we are making our life in managing this project easier. That's all. That's what we are doing through the WBS. Even while you are going through the creation of the WBS, you can also find the missing scope. How? So if suppose you are looking at the deliverable, I need to create the deliverable number 3. When I want to create the deliverable number 3, something wrong. The other deliverable I need to create. Otherwise, this deliverable, I will not be able to get it. Something wrong in our scope of work. Then we go back and review our scope of work. Yes, we missed the scope of work. So we can refine it. So we can, this we call it as fill the cracks. So going through the review of the WBS, we can able to identify the missing scope as well. Okay. This is all part of our good points. When you are going through the slides, you will see all these good points are there. Okay. So basically, we can able to understand the whole project now.